As Du Bois points out, freedom didn't solve all the problems of Black people in the United States, and it was naive to think that it would. But there was a sense that that it was slavery that was the entire problem, and once there would be freedom, then everything would be better. But it wasn't better. And for Du Bois, the reason that it wasn't immediately better was that education was necessary first, to be able to understand what the situation is, to be able to train others to develop their capacities, and so this took some time. And here he's describing this process that he thinks is essential to understanding what the current situation is for Black people in the United States. It changed the child of emancipation to the youth with dawning self-consciousness, that is, having some time to think and read and reflect. Self-consciousness, self-realization, self-respect. In those somber forests of his striving, his own soul rose before him, and he saw himself, darkly as through a veil. And yet he saw in himself some faint revelation of his power, of his mission. He began to have a dim feeling that to attain his place in the world, he must be himself and not another. For the first time he sought to analyze the burden he bore upon his back, that dead weight of social degradation, partially masked behind a half-named Negro problem. He felt his poverty, without a cent, without a home, without land, tools, or savings. He had entered into competition with rich, landed, skilled neighbors. To be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor race in a land of dollars is the very bottom of hardships. He felt the weight of his ignorance, not simply of letters, but of life, of business, of the humanities. The accumulated sloth and shirking and awkwardness of decades and centuries shackled his hands and feet. Nor was his burden all poverty and ignorance. The red stain of bastardy, which 2 centuries of systemic legal defilement of Negro women had stamped upon his race, meant not only the loss of ancient African chastity, but also the hereditary weight of a mass of corruption from white adulterers, threatening almost the obliteration of the Negro home. A people thus handicapped ought not to be asked to race with the world, but rather allowed to give all its time and thought to its own social problems. So the reflection that is gained by freedom then gives a person the possibility to recognize the depths of the situation in which they find themselves. That there's been this history of slavery and degradation, of bastardy, of defilement, that has created the situation that now needs to be solved, that's created the problem. And as he argues, it's not fair to ask people who have suffered under this oppression to solve their own problems, that they, to compete, to be able to survive, that they need to be given time, they need to figure out what's going on. So the competition is just unfair to, it's not an even race, simply being liberated and then being told, well, okay, so, make your living. And as a result, there is an anxiety about who you are, about yourself as a problem. That's part of the lesson of this chapter, is thinking about how it feels to be a problem and where this problem comes from and whose fault it is, and whose responsibility it is. And so here is Du Bois thinking about what is necessary to solve this problem. Work, culture, liberty. All these we need, not singly but together, not successively but together, each growing and aiding each, and all striving toward that vaster ideal that swims before the Negro people, the ideal of human brotherhood, gained through the unifying ideal of race, the ideal of fostering and developing the traits and talents of the Negro, not in opposition to or contempt for other races, but rather in large conformity to the greater ideals of the American Republic, so that someday on American soil, two world races may give each to each those characteristics both so sadly lack. So as you look at this passage and similar passages that Du Bois writes, think about what vision he's offering of race and justice. What is his conception? What's the problem? What's the solution? What does each race have to contribute to the other? What is each race lacking? So keep thinking about that. It's worth pointing out that that this article, this essay appeared in the journal The Atlantic Monthly, and the audience is educated, middle and upper class people, readers. And that would be mostly white, because those are, white people form the greater percentage of upper class educated readers at this point, but it would also include the black upper class. So he's speaking to a particular kind of reader, not speaking to the average black person. And so it's important to keep that kind of context in mind as we think about what he's saying in this book and to whom he's saying it and what his message is, and how he presents his message in relation to his audience and what his goals are.